It led to an unprecedented crackdown in the state's autism program. Yesterday, 5 investigators revealed 85 autism centers in Minnesota are now under investigation.
Tonight, investigative reporter Ryan Raish is back with how suspected fraudsters are targeting millions of your hard-earned tax dollars.
So remember, y'all, this was about 2 months ago that this report came out. So we're going to get a sense, some background context as to what was happening.
Take a look at this graph showing the explosion in this program. This is the amount of money the state has paid in Medicaid claims to autism treatment providers using your tax dollars. You can see in 2017, not that much, just more than $1 million. But you see the gradual growth here. In 2021, more than $80 million. But look at last year, more than $220 million paid out in claims, with a grand total of just shy of $700 million. This is what state investigators are now looking at, these soaring costs, and questioning how many providers are doing real work.
It makes me sad for the families.
Dr. Eric Larson has dedicated.
So y'all, you can see these fraudsters were targeting these programs for feeding children, for helping people who have housing instability, like homeless people or people who are in and out of housing, and people with autism, y'all. So it's like targeting the money for the most vulnerable among us.
His life to helping families with autism, running LaVos Institute Midwest here in Minneapolis. He even helped the state stand up its autism program a decade ago.
The only reason we're delivering the services is because families worked so hard over the past 30 years to develop this program.
But now that program is in the crosshairs of state investigators. As 5 Investigates first reported, 1 in 5 autism centers in the state is now under an investigation after a new crackdown on fraud. How do you explain that big of a number of open investigations?
Yeah, there was such a high need for autism services in Minnesota when the state began offering it that it's an unlicensed service. So there aren't the same structures in place.
Now, y'all remember when DOGE, at the beginning of this year, they tried to tackle the fraud, waste, abuse, and they got a lot of pushback. But we can see, y'all, from the way that this money is divvied up and doled out, that there are a lot of safeguards that should be in place that are either they're not in place or they're just not being recognized.
DHS says it stepped up enforcement late last year, around the time the feds raided these 2 clinics suspected of billing the state more than $20 million for services never provided.
I was never thinking somebody is going to submit fake bills.
Larson says he only started to get suspicious last year when he and his staff tried calling providers in the state directory. He couldn't reach at least 100 of them.
No apparent email address, no website, nobody answering the phone.
Red flag, you think?
Well, they're certainly not trying to deliver services.
Do we have an idea of how many of those are not even real?
We are visiting every single one.
Is this now, for some providers, the first time that they've ever had a site visit?
I can't speak to whether it's the first time some providers have had a site visit. What I do know is that since we designated them high risk, we're doing more site visits.
And that high-risk label means providers will face a more rigorous screening process. It's one of the new oversight measures in place moving forward. That's in addition to enhanced background checks and finally a new licensing system similar to daycares, which again, that doesn't exist right now in the autism program. So I think by 2027, they're supposed to propose and roll out this new system to license autism centers.
Again, who's watching the taxpayer dollars?
When you see that growth every year.
Exactly.
It's unbelievable.
It's very similar to what Kirsten just told us about.
Okay, stay on this, okay?
So y'all, this is absolutely incredible. And this was a couple of months ago. Now there has been an arrest. So let's go ahead and jump into that story and see how that unfolded. All right, so I didn't find a video report, so I'm going to read this. Woman is first charged in Minnesota autism fraud scheme, also tied to feeding our future. So, ooh, how much money did they come up on? Oh my gosh. A 28-year-old woman has been charged with wire fraud for her alleged role in a $14 million autism fraud scheme, announced the U.S. Attorney's Office. Asha Farhan Hassan was also charged in connection with the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme, for which she received $465,000. She sent hundreds of thousands of dollars abroad and even bought real estate in Kenya. Prosecutors say Hassan and others defrauded the Early Intensive Developmental and Behavioral Intervention Benefit, a publicly funded Minnesota health care program that offers services to people under the age of 21. So basically, I know you can be an adult at that age, but basically children with autism spectrum disorder. Hassan was listed as the only owner of Smart Therapy, but prosecutors say others had ownership stakes in it and weren't listed on DHS documents. Shortly after forming Smart Therapy, Hassan enrolled it as a provider agency in the program. So y'all see, look at this. Minnesota has to be the fraud capital of the universe at this point. So, but you know what? I will say this though. The one good thing is that so much of this fraud is coming to light in Minnesota, because I have no doubt that other states have had just as much fraud, if not more, but we don't hear about it as much in other states. So the one thing we can say, and you know what, a lot of this fraud is being uncovered by the Minnesota investigative reporters. They have those people out there doing their job, and they're turning over these rocks and looking under them and finding this fraud. Other states, imagine California, Florida, and New York. These states probably have double, if not triple, quadruple, 10 times the fraud, but we don't hear about it coming out of those states as often. Yeah, so before Florida was known as the fraud capital of the world, I think Minnesota is giving them a run for the money, y'all. Every other day, there's some kind of fraud related story out of Minnesota. Now, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, but I am going to flow right into this agent talking for a few minutes so you can hear some of these details for yourself. I'm going to sign off. I thank y'all for watching. Let me know down in the comments, why Minnesota? Why Minnesota? I think it's just that they have more people looking and uncovering. I think this kind of fraud is happening everywhere. I actually want to give kudos to Minnesota because they're finding it. I don't think it's happening more there. I just think they're finding it more there. Or maybe it's just hitting my radar more from Minnesota. Let me know what y'all think down in the comments, y'all. But before you do, please stop, hit the share button, share this video out over email, text message, WhatsApp, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, all of your favorite social mediums. And if you're not a subscriber, please do subscribe. To my people with the retirement, hit the link down below. And first link in the description, Paralegold, PARALEGOLD.com. Protect y'all, look at all this fraud. This is people's money. Don't you want to protect yours? Protect your retirement from the upsies, the downsies, the roundsies, and the fraudsters. Talk to our partners at Augusta Precious Metals at 844-651-8334. Thank y'all for watching. Love y'all, and we'll see you back in the next one.
Since September 19th, officers from our Fraud Detection and National Security Directorate, working in teams, have conducted over 1,000 site visits across the Minneapolis-St. Paul area as part of this operation. What they found should shock all of America. Focusing on a list of over 1,000 target cases involving more than 900 individuals, our officers encountered blatant marriage fraud, visa overstays, people claiming to work at businesses that can't be found, forged documents, abuse of the H-1B visa system, abuse of the F-1 visas, and many other discrepancies. Over the course of the operation, our officers found indication of fraud, non-compliance, or public safety and national security concerns in nearly a little less than 50% of the cases interviewed. We found troubling patterns with the Uniting for Ukraine program that should have raised serious concerns under other administrations, such as an individual filing to sponsor more than 100 aliens, and organizations sponsoring hundreds. We are continuing to investigate these cases. Some of the other troubling cases that our officers found. In one case, officers identified an alien who had overstayed his visa waiver, who was the son of a known or suspected terrorist on the no-fly list. He had previously been found to have engaged in marriage fraud, which resulted in the denial of several immigration benefit requests. He was arrested and is now presently being returned to his country of origin. In another, an individual admitted to obtaining a fake death certificate in Kenya for just $100 to prove he was no longer married. In reality, His wife is alive, living here in Minneapolis, and is the mother of 5 of his children. And incidentally, he has another wife living in Sweden with whom he has an additional 3 children. In another case, an alien entered the United States without inspection in 2023, was released by Border Patrol. The alien married a U.S. citizen while in removal proceedings and was interviewed at the Minneapolis-St. Paul USCIS field office just last week, where both he and his American spouse, stated under oath that their marriage was legitimate. The USCIS officers conducting the interview were suspicious. The site visits were authorized the same day. The American spouse ultimately that afternoon admitted the marriage was fraudulent and entered into solely for immigration purposes and withdrew her petition for that alien. This type of same-day action for from interview to site visit has really never happened before. And I am incredibly impressed and thankful to the diligent work of the agents who made that happen for the first time, but not for the last time. And finally, I wanted to note, in one case, an alien engaged in marriage fraud by taking advantage of an elderly U.S. citizen spouse, including threats and severe neglect. The American spouse was able to divorce the alien with the help of her family and caregivers, but the family still lives in fear of retaliation from the alien over the failed marriage fraud scam. These are not victimless